Welcome to Check Out This Record, where my good friend and former bandmate Frank DeMaria and I turn years of emails, text messages, and driving our friends and family crazy talking about music they've never heard of or could care less about into a podcast, this podcast.
And that is the voice of Mark Cheever. He and I met a long, long time ago in a warehouse rehearsal studio far, far away. We've been friends ever since, and while we now live 300 plus miles apart, it's impossible to get us to stop talking about music. And I mean impossible.
Now, Frank and I have been in a few bands apiece, most of them together, and only put out one recording, Fear the Bomb's 2007-ish, We Don't Belong. One's called The Best Band from Fort Lauderdale You've Never Heard of, and considered okay by our friends, and pretty good from that guy that nobody likes but still goes to every show. It doesn't matter. We had a blast making it with our good friend Josh Schomburg on bass. Frank sang and played guitar, and I beat the shit out of my drum set because that's what I like to do. The point is, we're not experts. We're also not professional musical journalists. We just like music. And let's face it, we're just two old punks hoping a podcast about punk rock will score us free tickets to the next Bad Religion concert. Just kidding. That last album sucked, and you know the next one's going to suck too.
And it's not just punk rock, but mostly we're rock and roll guys through and through. So we'll be talking about folk rock, hard rock, 90s alternative, metal, indie, lo-fi, singer-songwriter, power pop, rockabilly, psychobilly, some of my personal favorites, and really anything that we could get our hands on to make our ears perk up. Now, we'll be doing this all of our own. So most of the albums and recordings we're going to be listening to and talking about will be relatively easy to find on the internet for those who want to play along at home. So here's the kicker, right? We're not always going to like what we've picked out for each other. For example, I'm a heavy riffed, heavy metal kind of guy, and Frank is not. This is very true. When it comes to writing songs and singing them, I like melody and I like verses and choruses. And if you think about our roles in the band when we were playing together, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, but I also think that as a guitarist, Frank would be really into the righteous jams of Doom Rider. So I might pick their 2009 album, Darkness Come Alive, for their super gnarly riffs and the pure drive of the section that never relents.
And I would totally listen to that for sure. And maybe I'll like it and maybe I won't. And maybe I won't like an album, but I want Mark to check it out to see if he could confirm my opinions or maybe just say, hey, listen, Frank, you're out of your mind. And what I can tell you is that we'll dive into each record with an open mind and tell you what we really think of it. If you got something you want us to listen to, currently you can check us out on Instagram at Check Out This Record, and we'll give it a listen, maybe even bring it up on the show.
You know that just our wives are going to listen to this, right?
Oh, totally. It'd just be them listening to it, and be that as it may, hey, this is our podcast and we can do whatever we want. And for the sake of letting anyone listening that isn't our wives, let's pretend this is high fidelity right now and do a top 5 list. So let's go into our top 5 current favorite albums. Mark, I want you to start.
So in no particular order, but in exact order from 5 to 1, Spanish love songs, Schmaltz. At number 4, Dead to Me's African Elephants. I'm going to throw it back a little bit to the Ramones and Subterranean Jungle. Propaganda's last record, Victory Lap, is still squeaking in at number 2. I absolutely love that record. And speaking of the last record they put out, Swinging Utters, Peace and Love, that record has been stuck in my ear since the day it came out. I absolutely love it. Frank, what do you got?
Oh man, this is a tough one because the list is going to be forever rotating. But as of today, I would say these are the top 5. It's going to be Black Love by the Afghan Wigs. Number 4 would be Tallahassee by the Mountain Goats. Places That Are Gone by Tommy Keene would be the 3rd one. Head Trip in Every Key, Super Drag, so taking that one back to the 90s. And then number 1, I would say Smoke Ring for My Halo by Kurt Vile.
What interesting and unusual choices we have both made. You know, that has me thinking, since this is our first episode, let's make it Great First Records.
The almighty freshman album. Possible make it or break it for a band.
Aren't we required under the Punk Rock Act of 1977 to discuss the scene first?
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, we are. So when we're talking about scenes in underground and punk music, we know of them existing in, right, New York, DC, California. And by the early 80s, one also existed in Minneapolis, and it produced many bands such as The Replacements, Husker Du, and Soul Asylum. In fact, the band we love, The Hold Steady, known before as Lifter Puller, has roots embedded in Minneapolis and makes reference to this in their songs. Now, The Replacements' first album, Sorry Mom, Forgot to Take Out the Trash, embodies this scene. This is where their sound began. Now, it doesn't end here at all, as they will eventually evolve, but this album is a little bit different from the counterparts in the scene. It keeps the pop sensibility, even with the throat-shredding vocals of Paul Westerberg. So along with my love for the band Replacements and Paul Westerberg, my friend, this is why I wanted you to check out this record.
So this record's pretty badass. You can definitely smell 1981 all over it. Influences from the Ramones to Black Flag to one of my personal favorites, George Thorogood and the Destroyer, as thick as cheap peanut butter on this thing. It's awesome. These dudes were clearly in the shadows of Husker Du. That didn't stop them from getting into trouble and developing their great own sound. You know what? Make that sentence work however you like it. I hate music, careless, shiftless when idle, I'm in trouble, all have wonderful early punk aesthetic, not quite pop punk, not hardcore, but earnest in their simplicity. Johnny's Gonna Die and Kick Down Your Door sound like they're from a future predicted long ago in another timeline that would lead to the band's later post-punk sound. They began a thread that'll carry across many of their upcoming albums, with Take a Ride blurring the line between 70s rock and roll riffs and punk rock pacing. And of course, being a huge Bouncing Souls fan, I can't help but feel the influence that the Replacements must have had on them with songs like Customer and I Bought a Headache. Some of my favorite tracks were definitely Shiftless When Idle and Careless. Otto and Taking a Ride, as much as I love that kind of old-fashioned rocky rolly sound, really just kind of fell a little flat for me. I'll definitely be checking out more albums from The Replacement. I know it doesn't get a ton punkier, but that's cool. I'll probably avoid the honky-tonk stuff that seemed pretty thick on Hootenanny. The folk country rockabilly sound gets old fast for my taste.
Cool, man. Well, I'm happy you feel that way. I'm really glad you were able to check out that album, because I think it all started there for them, and you could definitely see what was to come. So with that said, now, my friend, what do you have for me?
As you know, in the year of our Lord, 1998, some of our favorite records were released. Rancid's Life Won't Wait, Lagwagon's Let's Talk About Feelings, Alkaline Trio's God Damn It, All's Mass Nerder, The Refused Shape of Punk to Come. My Lord, the list goes on and on. It doesn't just stop there. There were Anti-Flag albums, Bad Religion albums, Vandals albums, Strung Out albums, Dropkick Murphys. Plus, and we'll save this for another episode, a ton of great ska albums. Among all of those records, a four-piece from Minneapolis, Minnesota brought the fucking thunder. Snarling, crunching, catchy as fuck thunder. These dudes were cutting their teeth on the small stages of Minneapolis right along Lifter Puller. I am, of course, speaking of the melodic hardcore album Midwestern Songs of the Americas by Dillinger 4, released by Hopeless Records. Between the song titles that aren't just choruses, catchy harmonies, and gang vocals disguised as harmonies, I really think you'll dig this record.
Cool, man. And so what we have here is another band from Indianapolis, and I've heard of them before, and they're on many compilation CDs that I would get, but I haven't listened to a full album of theirs from front to back. Now, this is actually, from my research, not their first release, as they've had EPs prior to this, but it's their first full length. So that was just a nerd in me, kind of bringing up some quick little tidbits about it. So some other things, I noted that this album, the song titles are long and they're unique, which I've been a fan of. There are multiple singers in the band too, and they have nice, bright sounding and loud guitars, maybe a little bit more samples than I would like. So what I'm trying to do here with all these records I'm listening to is I'm trying to separate the 39-year-old that I am today and the 18, 19-year-old that would have heard this, say, back in 1998. Those are two different people with different tastes. Okay, but what about the actual songs on this album? So I'm the type that likes to know how many singers and what they're playing, and do they play instruments and the names. It's just something I like, because I like to have a visual of that. So we have here what I believe is to be 3 singers, and right off the bat, the interchange of the vocals is dominant in the first song, OKFMDOA. And I'd like to say that this sets the tone for the album, but I don't think so, as I feel there are other blistering tracks on here that better represent this album. It showcases the many singers, but also feels like many punk songs that I maybe would have heard during this period. Now, track 2, titled Number 51, Dick Buckus, had me moving at the gym, and I felt the catchy sing-along aspect of it. It was definitely a punk anthem. Meanwhile, doing cardio, as soon as the song came on, I kicked it up to high speed for sure. That had me going. Now, it's hard to hear melody on the first listen, but as I listen to this more, I'm hearing lots of cool stuff in my head. Now, I personally almost wish that track 3, It's a Fine Line Between the Monkey and the Robot, was the first song on the album. I think that would have been perfect after the audio click that was there. I really dug this track from the drums, alternative vocals, and the chords. I'm sure live it really gets the crowd going. The next 3 tracks for me represented, I would say, an uninteresting part of the album for me. It just didn't do it. I want to say it's filler of the album. It's not that they're bad tracks. It just didn't raise my eyebrow. Now, from my research, the most popular track is Double Whiskey, Coke, No Ice. And I could see why. The choruses of children singing in the beginning, great sounding loud chords, and the great gang vocals. I could see being at a bar and everyone singing along to this. Now, also in my research, I saw that there were some Green Day comparisons as far as when their song American Idiot came out, that there were some similarities with the chords, and I saw some comments in relation to that. Now, I also found out, ironically, they toured together in Japan in 2001, and Dillinger 4 has this split record with Pinhead Gunpowder, which was a side project by Billy Joe Armstrong. So who really knows if there was some influence there? And I have to say that there are limited options for when you're playing this style of music with the chords. So when you're writing songs, some people just have to understand that they might just sound alike, and you know what? That's okay. First 3 times I listened to this album was at the gym, in the car, and while at work. I must say, for me personally, it got better with each listen, and I felt the second half of the album was stronger with tracks such as Shut Your Little Trap, Mosh for Jesus, and Handmade Hard Times Handed Back. Much of my research described this as melodic punk, and although melodies exist, I kind of wish there's more to differentiate from the album, and I'm sure this is something that makes an appearance in their latter albums. Okay, so what I liked the song titles. I like the longness of them, the uniqueness. It's better than those generic song titles out there. I like the faster tracks. This, again, had me really moving at the gym. The guitar tones, I thought they were nice, loud, and audible. The multiple lead singers, it was good for the imagination. It keeps you guessing. And then, of course, the second half on the album that grew on me with more listens. What I didn't like in particular, the singer with the higher pitched vocals, I identified as a gentleman, Eric Funk. Didn't do it for me, although on the third track, he does a great job. But again, it's something I'd like to see how it progresses. This is the first album, and I did a sneak peek on the future albums, and for me, I could hear it getting better. The production on the vocals, maybe I thought the mixing could be a little bit better, but listen, I'm going to be honest. What do I know? But that's just one thing I thought of. The samples, maybe a little bit too many for my liking. I think it was overkill. The opening track, it didn't engage me from the beginning. I'm big on opening tracks. I think it really sets the tone for an album, and I'll carry that to the live shows as well. Again, not a bad song by any means, but to me, it's a little bit more generic. And I would have liked to hear more hooks on some of the songs, and they're memorable. Again, that middle portion just threw me off a little bit. My favorite track, though, it's a fine line between the monkey and the robot, or, of course, the popular choice, the Double Whiskey, Coke, No Ice. Least favorite track, again, it's that first one, the OKFMDOA. And a fun fact, Mark, because we fun fact time. That's right. Yeah, because we brought up Hold Steady and their previous band Lifter Puller. When Craig Finn, singer of both those bands, moved to New York after Lifter Puller's breakup, he brought his love for Dillinger 4 with him. On certain songs from the Hold Steady's debut album, Almost Killed Me, Finn sang that D4 is for lovers. And in 2008, when his band, The Hold Steady, released Stay Positive, which is an album we also love, the opening track, Constructive Summer, name check Double Whiskey, Coke, No Ice.
Well, I'm happy you feel that way, Frank. What should we do next week?
Well, this is the second episode, and that can mean only one thing in our heads. Awesome third albums, my friend.
I like the way you do math, sir. I've got a great record for you to check out. It's easy for us to take an anti-label view and complain about how record labels are ruining our beloved scene.
You're doing air quotes, aren't you?
You better believe it. Anyways, it's the early 90s. The dreaded monsters running record labels were busy trying to find the next Nirvana. And thanks to their efforts, a band from England had their third studio album released in the U.S., 1991's Mush from Leatherface. This is a record and a band that managed to slip my radar for years. I'm taking a super late pass on Leatherface. I absolutely love this band. Despite the fact that they did a split, the first BYO split actually, with Hot Water Music, I still managed to not catch them until just a few months ago, as they came up in a random shuffle. The hooks are catchy. Frank Stubbs' voice is gravelly but honest, and dare I say charming. I really think you're going to appreciate what he does vocally. This is a roll down the windows, turn up the volume, hit the gas kind of record. It just drives, that leaves you euphoric despite the melancholy undertones.
Well, I'm amped to check this out, my friend. And like you, I've seen them on splits with Hot Water Music before, and it's one of those bands that I haven't been able to sit down and listen to this record. So I'm going to definitely look forward to doing that for sure. Now, what I have for you, my friend, this is coming from my wife's hometown of Cleveland, Ohio, right? Cleveland rocks. That's what they say.
That's what they say.
That's what
I've
they
never
say.
Met they.
Well, let me know when you meet them, okay?
Sure.
So Cloud Nothings has been one of my more recent favorite bands. To me, they blend indie rock, noise rock, post-hardcore, lo-fi, and some power pop into a unique sound. Now, their second album, third LP overall, so again, sticking with that theme, Attack on Memory, sees a change in their sound. Their previous albums had more of a pop sound to them, but this is way more aggressive. Singer Dylan Baldy, he named the album Attack on Memory as a reflection of his feelings towards the previous sound. Now, Dylan also cited the specific influences of the album, such as Black Sabbath, Nina Hagen, Killdozer, Sounds, Thin Lizzy, and The Wipers. And outside of Sabbath and Thin Lizzy, I can't say I'm actually familiar with any one of those bands, so maybe we'll be diving into them eventually as well. This album is very unconventional with 8 tracks. It's frantic, it's melodic, it's noisy, it's aggressive, and that's why I want you to check out this record, my friend.
Sounds interesting. I can't wait to check that out.
All right, everyone. So that's a wrap for our very initial first episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. Remember to check us out on Instagram and wherever you could catch your favorite podcasts. Thank you.
Thank you.